Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I apologise if you can hear the wind outside. It's very windy today, very windy. And viewer discretion is advised. Some topics may upset people in this hoodoo selection that I will be doing. I am doing it with the utmost respect, I mean no disrespect. I'm just learning people what I know. So we finished off where we're on to the New Orleans Voodoo. And I do want to get into Marie Laveau, but we will get into that later. I think she deserves more credit and more time than just a simple episode. In the 19th century, though, New Orleans Voodoo, which I believe it was also known as Creole Voodoo, evolved to embrace the aspects of spiritualism. It will take aspects from European and African folklore with Kabbalistic influences. That's where it takes the bits from hoodoo as well, basically. Native American herbalism, it took from that, Jewish mysticism, and it was also brought into voodoo. I believe there would be sigils and seals that weren't there before that they were brought in. And that's how hoodoo became linked with voodoo, because the true nature of voodoo simply changed a lot through time, using other spiritual paths to combine them all. So hoodoo has been around a very long time. It's just that in the 19th century, voodoo erupted into something quite big, and it took on all the aspects of the other spiritual paths and brought them all together. I think, to be fair, a lot of them do that now anyway. If we look at New Orleans Voodoo, it involves group worship, ceremonial practices. Hoodoo can be just individual. Voodoo also involves the worship and veneration of the African, I think it's the Haitian deities as well. And hoodoo does not take influence from outside energies to provide aid in everyday life. What that means is, in hoodoo you will petition for help, whereas in voodoo it's a must. Like, you don't have to in hoodoo, but in voodoo it's a must, you must do. In hoodoo it's a choice, whether you do that or not. You can do it for support and luck. You can do it to benefit you, to benefit someone else. The lines in hoodoo can become very fuzzy, because it includes the darker side and the lighter side. Marie Laveau, 19th century famous voodoo queen, was born in 1801 in New Orleans and was identified as a devoted Catholic. However, she still participated in voodoo. She was famed, listen this, for her hoodoo charms for the sick, and was said to have performed charms of protection to aid escaped slaves. She also worked as a nurse and is credited for saving the lives of people afflicted with yellow fever and such things. Many people say she had the power to appear in more than one place at a single time. She could control court cases. However, her power was based on fear, and there was a belief that she practiced cannibalism and even child sacrifice. There are stories of her making charms for good luck and casting spells of disease, breaking up relationships and healing others. Please note, this could be speculation only, but we'll get into it later. But it could just literally be people talk. The story goes forward, Chinese whispers, that sort of deal. During the late 19th century and early 20th century, many of the best root workers became nationally known, and people travelled hundreds of miles to consult. They really did. Dr. Buzzard of South Carolina, then there's Aunt Carolina of Newport, Arkansas, and the Seven Sisters of New Orleans were famous people of voodoo, and the latter two were celebrated in blues songs. In modern times, after the Civil War, many freed slaves began to distance themselves from voodoo. It had indeed now been bent and twisted to be bad spell casting rather than a religion. as talks does put a bad stigma on voodoo. This pushed voodoo underground, where it now became known as what we know it as. That's hoodoo. So basically, it was hoodoo. And what happened was, we took all these other things and put them all together along with voodoo and just called it all hoodoo. So hoodoo's always been there in its original form. It just got mixed up and then became voodoo and then went back to hoodoo, which is really strange. Then it became more commercialised. There were spiritual shops across the southern United States. It could be often found in like record shops and gas stations back in the day, which I know sounds bizarre now, but it could. The spiritual industry they brought along some new products. They were rooted actually in the origins of hoodoo and not voodoo. They brought them forth into the mainstream. Practitioners took on the role of a spiritual healer. These spiritual healers and readers would have been hoodoo workers or voodoo workers. That would have been what they were called. But because of the stigma surrounding the practice, they changed themselves to spiritual healers and readers. Traditional root workers continued to prepare baths, washes, powders, but then it became manufactured, didn't it? And you could just buy them over the counter on a much larger scale, meaning that people just became more reliant on manufactured items, which obviously that happened today with every craft, really. When you look, you can look at things out there. You can buy pretty much all things manufactured, I do believe. By the 1930s, anything a hoodoo practitioner needed could be found at a spiritual store. These stores expanded beyond New Orleans, and such products are now marketed on the web. Hoodoo is not a New Age practice. It's just that the New Age movement led to an increase of interest, which led to more people becoming aware of hoodoo. In the early 20th century, Jewish chemists manufactured cosmetics, household products, adding magical perfumes, candles and incense to their mail-order catalogues. Cheap pamphlets on magic from Jewish and German, Christian communities too, were readily available. Hoodoo also incorporates European botanical folklore, along with Native American traditions. European books of magic have been popular with root workers. The use of moon phases in spellcasting and astrological methods used for timing spells, they were derived from Jewish and Christian magical purpose sources. And I find that odd, but it's true. In addition, the reciting of psalms and selected biblical verses were also introduced to spellcasting, such as the Seta Foursquare and the use of talismans, lucky charms, and they all derive from the very same sources. They all go back to that original practice of hoodoo. The supernatural elements of folklore religion in Europe, not ones based on Christianity, because it was sort of influenced too much then by hoodoo beliefs, so it changed things. And some of the things that we can look at are the horseshoes, the rabbit's foot. They were all used for good luck and for tools of protection. Not so much today, I don't think, but they were a really big thing back then. The Hoodoo Bottle has now been renamed the Witch's Bottle. It was the Hoodoo Bottle. And in European spiritual practices, they will call it the Witch's Bottle, but traditionally it was the Hoodoo Bottle. The use of brooms for conjuring and ceremonies, that was in hoodoo. It's now in witchcraft. Salt for protection, the practice of covering mirrors, stopping the clock after death, the creation of ritual circles, robes and tools, all appear in the grimoires and are all connected to hoodoo, very old hoodoo. Hoodoo has also now expanded to include Asian religions, many Asian religions, I think, and cultural imagery, including, I think, we'll go with the main one, the product names it includes, and the formulas derived from various Buddhists from around the world, Teos, and Hindu sources from the late 19th century. Popular hoodoo spiritualists and the suppliers with Asian roots included such things as Chinese wash, laughing Buddha statues, as their products sort of became available, and they did sell as well. They sold a lot. Hindu religions during the 1960s led root workers to adapt and work with Hindu deities, such as Ganesh, the elephant-headed god. This just shows how far hoodoo has actually come, and the adaptations it has gone through. Hoodoo more recently has been a tendency to be considered as a hindrance to the understanding of voodoo. This is not so. Harry Middleton, whose work was published in 1970 to 1978, was one of the first scholars to explore hoodoo culture. Hoodoo is intimately tied to its African American history. Many contemporary practitioners of hoodoo are fighting against the cultural appropriation of their craft. I'm not sure if you knew that. But yes, what this states, no matter what you practice today, you will find the root of it in hoodoo. Hoodoo will have been called simple conjure, and it'll have adapted its name hoodoo as it went along. Voodoo took bits of hoodoo. It went from being called conjure to voodoo, back to hoodoo. Because what happened was, voodoo became known as something dark, and it wasn't. So they started to involve all the other spiritual practices, everything, all the worldwide ones. You have voodoo. It has no law, it has no rules, and it involves every single spiritual path, including the Bible. That's pretty awesome, I think, because you can see how it's adapted through time and changed, yet its roots are still very much there. Now, I am a rose and thorn. However, hoodoo has been the closest thing that I could find that relates to the practices in which I did. That's why I had to go back to go forward. Because if we look at hoodoo, even though it was probably just conjure or a name similar to that, it's got so much in it. It changed so much through time, it adapted, but the roots are still there for every basic witch out there. The witchcraft, it's like the roots are there. It always had hoodoo bottles, it always had the broom, the circles, the moon phases. Pretty surprising, really, when you think about all the changes and adaptations it's been through. And the fact that, unfortunately, if voodoo was a negative craft, which I don't believe it was, it's long gone. Its true origins, they've been lost, because it was a religion. It was a very particular religion with an accurate following. And unfortunately, to try and find someone who knows the true, real roots of voodoo, I've not yet. I'm definitely interested in finding someone who's rooted in it. So it would be someone of age, obviously. But yeah, I think it's amazing the adaptations that we have been through. When we come back the next time, we will be doing all about spiritual baths. The different ones that we have in hoodoo, which obviously, as you know, there's baptizing now, isn't there? Baptizing in Christianity. It was a spiritual bath in hoodoo. It's kind of the point I'm making. Things have changed. Adaptations have been made on a purpose to blend everything together. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave this episode here. Thank you for listening. And we shall do Marie Laveau in her own episode, because I think she at least deserves that. Many blessings, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. Bye.